Welcome everyone. This is Christina, and this is One Creative Direction. If you're a new subscriber, welcome to my channel. If you're a current subscriber, welcome back. I very much appreciate everybody coming to join me. So today I'm going to be following up on the latest video that I released for mixing 3 different cell activators. So in this video, we're going to only be using the first one, and that is the Arissa Rue, where I used the Black Artist Loft Flow acrylic as the color. And I'm going to voice over and speed this up because making this type of painting is a rather long process. And if you've watched me at all, you know I don't like long videos. And there's a part 2 to this that's going to make it even longer. So I want to keep it as short as I possibly can and cover everything. So there's a little bit of a bonus at the end. Let's get started, and I'll get you up to speed on where I'm at here. So my base, I'm using 2 different house paints. Since this is going to be a bloom, and I want to blow on the blooms, I'm using house paint, which I've done in the past quite a bit. And in this video, I'm using 2 different Valspar colors. The top one is actually leftover paint from my bathroom, and I believe it's eggshell finish Valspar. And then the bottom is one of the infamous gallons that I bought that was a mist tint for $8. And that's also a Valspar in some shade of gray, I'm not sure. So my thought process was I wanted to put a couple of blooms on here and blow them out. One on top and one on the bottom of that division line. But I made some mistakes in here, and I want to kind of go through what happened. First mistake I made is I did try to thin out the top color, the aqua blue, before I laid it down on the canvas with some Floetrol. It did thin it out a little bit, but it was still too thick, which is why, I made my own recipe for blooms. If you saw my video for the black base, you'll know why I'm so frustrated with house paint. And this is a perfect example of why I don't like to use house paint anymore for my blooms. So the paint was really thick. The second part of the mistake was one of my colors that I laid down was also a little thick. I did try to thin it down, but I don't think I thinned it down enough. And I don't, besides the fact that the paint was super thick, it started to dry really fast because this is a long process. So before I even got to spin it, the paint started drying, and it didn't spin very much. I mean, the design didn't really move much because the paint's too thick. So I decided, as you can see, since I was having trouble, I decided to add a third one because the paint's not moving. And I got really frustrated on the second one because the paint wasn't moving when I attempted to blow it, and I got out my world's smallest blow dryer, which I don't know why I was thinking that was going to help, because I get really frustrated when I use that because it's so concentrated in one tiny little area. And you can see that it didn't really help. It actually made the design worse. So there's a lot of things that we can learn from this, and I'm going to follow up in the last portion of the video with how to do it correctly. So this portion's almost over, so you can see I'm at the end, and I'm going to stop the camera and spin it out and bring you back and do some explanation. But I do a little bit of modification to try to correct a lot of my mistakes. It didn't necessarily help. And in the second section, I show you the dried result and why I hate house paint. I mean, it just kind of drives it all home. So stay tuned, and we'll go through that follow-up. All right, I'll catch you in a few. Okay, I'm back to show you the results. I will tell you so you can learn from my mistakes. I made an epic mistake. I wasn't thinking, and this is a really good example of what not to do, and also why I stopped using house paint for my pillow because it is so difficult to work with. So you'll see what I mean as I take you through here. The paint started drying. I got a phone call. I had to answer my phone, and I walked out of the room for like 5 or 10 minutes. And the paint started to dry before I was able to spin it, and therefore it didn't spin a lot, especially on this side. And you can see how just uneven the paint is. I'm gonna let it dry. I even tried to pick it up and tilt it. It didn't tilt. You can see on this side, it definitely moved a lot more. You can see the bloom went off the side of the canvas there. As I mentioned, I was expecting that, although I was expecting it to go off of this side as well. I was expecting it to move further down here, and it did not. It barely moved at all, which tells me this paint here, even though it was the same paint, was thicker than the gray. I even added, before I started, I even added some Floetrol to this teal blue to try to thin it out. It seemed when I shook it up a little bit to mix it, it seemed like it was a bit thicker, which is why I added the Floetrol. Probably should have added a tad bit of water as well. But you can see, and please learn from my mistakes, and please understand this is exactly why I make the bloom base like the black recipe that I showed you. Exactly why I do this, because this is what you always fight with house paint. It's too thick, it's, you know, it's so hard to work with. It dries too fast before you even get anything done. I did that whole bloom flower the other night and didn't have any issues with it. So yeah, it's a little frustrating, but I'm gonna let this dry. If it doesn't dry good, I'll probably just sand it off and paint over it after I coat it again with my universal white. But hopefully I can fix this, this rough, uneven paint. Not so much on the gray side, but definitely on the teal side. But I mean, the blooms don't look too bad. It definitely didn't move like I wanted it to, so it's not gonna break my heart if it dries horrible and I have to sand it down. So yeah, so don't do what I did and leave the paint sit there before you spin it. I should have just told the person I'll call them back. But anyway, I digress. But you can see the cell activator works beautifully, which is really the point of this video. Besides my epic blowout fail using the world's smallest blow dryer, which I really hate it. Until I can get a bigger end, it blows in such a small area that it really, I really don't care for it. So anyway, that's it for tonight. Welcome back, everyone. I wanted to bring you back and go over the follow-up that I mentioned in the first section. I know it looks the same as it did when I started the video, but the paint on the canvas is actually different. So what I did is, because I get so frustrated with house paint, as I've mentioned, I went ahead and mixed these two colors using that same recipe that I released the video for my base paint to eliminate the house paint as the pillow. So I'm showing the dried result, and as you saw at the end of the last portion of the video, just how horribly it dried because the paint was so thick and it wouldn't spin, and just so many issues as I identified. But I wanted you guys to see, you know, how horribly this dried. It has a nice like shine to it that from using that iridescent paint, but other than that, it's just horrible. The blooms didn't turn out the way I wanted them to. The paint was just horrible. So I'm going to have to sand this one down since this is on a wood panel. I'll just sand it down and start all over. But in the meantime, I wanted to, you know, mix the same paints up using that base recipe that I shared. in these same two colors and do it again so you can see the differences in how they turn out. So I'm going to speed the video up, and because again it's a long process and this is a long video. So you can see I mixed this paint, and one of the biggest mistakes I made on this follow-up is that I am so paranoid about the paint and not moving in the previous attempt that I laid just a tad bit too much paint on the canvas, but it ended up being okay after I spun it out because I really wanted the blooms to go off of two of the corners, the opposite corners. So it did end up beautifully. And this is it's a 12 inch. It's the same exact size, but this is a 12-inch gallery wrap canvas. So yeah, I'm going to let you watch the rest of this, and I'm going to tell you right now what colors I used. I don't think I went over that, so I always like to mention like what colors I'm using. So the first color I laid down, the darker blue, was Artist Loft Cobalt Blue Metallic. That's the first one. The second one is Modern Masters Glacier Blue, one of my favorites. The third blue I use is Pebeo Studios Iridescent Green Blue. And then of course I use the 24 karat gold for the last layer before the cell activator, which I think just really like gives it a more intense reaction with the cell activator when you put 24 karat gold down before it. So yeah, I think you'll see like the huge difference in the results as you watch the rest of this video and then see the finished product at the end. So I'm gonna let you watch the rest of it, and I'll come back in the follow-up. Thanks, guys. All right, guys, I'm back. I just wanted to show you the end result real quick. I may have had a little bit too much paint on there, admittedly, because I was worried about not having enough, and I think I might have put a little bit too much. Additionally, kind of thinned out a few of my bloom paints before I poured, so I think the combination of the two, having too much paint on there. But overall, it's definitely much smoother. I spun it out a little bit to kind of get that destructed bloom kind of look. So yeah, I wanted it to stretch to both corners. So yeah, that's the end of this one. Stay tuned for some more. I did some videos of the other two cell activators as well, so stay tuned for those. Thanks for joining me, guys. Bye now.